What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Binge on the King Crusoe YouTube channel. This week, we are doing my final reading wrap-up and TBR video for 2022. It's kind of crazy that pretty much 12 months on the channel has already gone by. It's really kind of crazy to me, but I don't really have that much to say for the intro of this video besides that fact, except that I suppose I will let you know that there will be some changes coming to the channel in 2023. If you want to have the scoop on what's going to be, changing, what's going to be staying, what's going to be being shifted around a little bit in 2023, stick around and you'll be able to hear about that in the January State of Affairs video that will be coming out, hopefully, most likely on January 1st, 2023. So, without further ado, I just want to jump into this and talk about what I read and what I read in November and what I'm going to read in December as we round out the end of the year. Now, in November, I had the goal to read one book and one book alone, and that was going to be Les Mis by Victor Hugo. Now, the time that I'm recording this is actually a few days before the end of the month because of logistical reasons. Like I said, changes are coming to the channel, and because of some of those things occurring, I'm having to record this video a little bit early. And with that being said, I have not actually finished Les Mis quite yet. I know I've had multiple opportunities to be able to do so throughout the month, but there have been a couple things that happened. First off, earlier in the month, I think on the 8th, the game God of War Ragnarok came out. If any of you viewers are gamers, you assuredly know that this was a pretty big thing that happened, and I began playing that on the morning of the 9th, and I believe it was the morning of the 16th or something that I finished. I spent essentially all of my time at home during that 1 week period playing that game and not really reading. I only read little bits and pieces at work as I had the chance to do so during that time period. So I didn't get as much of Les Mis read in the first half of the month as I could have, even though I was really ahead by the time the game came out, ironically. But then, a little bit later in the month, some things about looking at potential apartments to be able to move into cropped up, and I was looking at some of those and dealing with some of that stuff and other personal life things, and I believe that happened in the middle of last week. By the time December actually hits, it would have been probably about a week and a half ago by the time this video actually comes out. So at the time that I'm recording this, I'm not quite finished, but I'm very close. I definitely will be able to finish Les Mis by the end of November, though. If I just buckle down and get a lot read the next few days, I will be able to finish it on time and complete my goal. And that was really all that I was hoping for. I knew that Ragnarok was coming out and that it was going to really affect my reading schedule, and I knew that there would probably be some things occurring like apartment situations and stuff like that near the end of the month that would also cut into reading time as well. So I planned for that and didn't put anything on my TBR besides this. However, I do have another thing to add. Many of you know that a few months ago I did begin listening to The Wandering Inn on audio just because I figured that if I was ever going to give The Wandering Inn or anything like it a chance, reading it or anything like that, I wouldn't actually read it. Firstly, because I do not like reading online. I do not like reading on screens when it comes to novels or anything similar to that. It just doesn't really work for me. So doing the online web novel reading of The Wandering Inn wasn't going to work, but because they have been releasing The Wandering Inn on audio, I decided to pick those up and give the story a shot that way. I did actually finish Volume 1, which surprised me. I wasn't planning on doing that. I was just hoping that I would be up to 75% or something like that by the end of the month. No, I finished The Wandering Inn before the halfway point of November, if I'm remembering correctly, and honestly, I unironically enjoyed The Wandering Inn. The slice of life qualities of Volume 1 especially were very, very fun and enjoyable. There were a few aspects, a couple characters that at times got really annoying and were a little bit hard to push through. One chapter in particular, chapter 50 on the audio version, that just really grinded my gears to the point that, like, if I had DNF'd it, I actually wouldn't have felt bad, but the end of it was just so good. The climax, really unexpected stuff happened. I'm kind of amazed that the author decided to make some of those bold decisions at the very end of the volume. So I will actually be planning on continuing The Wandering Inn at some point in time in the future. Not entirely sure when. It'll probably be like probably mid to late spring time or something like that in 2023 when I actually start volume 2. In the meantime, I want to get some other stuff done and, you know, work on some other projects, not spend all of my free time when I'm doing other stuff listening to that. I also want to start catching up on listening to some more new music releases since I haven't done a whole lot of that in 2022. I think in 2023 I want to start my blog back up on my website and be able to review albums and stuff. So if I spend all of my time listening to Wandering Inn on audio whenever I'm doing stuff instead of listening to music, I can't do that. So we'll see what I end up deciding to do. When it comes to Book of the Month, obviously, I only really have The Wandering Inn technically and Les Mis to choose from, and while I did enjoy the very end of The Wandering Inn, and even though I haven't quite finished up Les Mis yet, Les Mis definitely deserves Book of the Month. And the way that I've heard that it ends from several of the other people who I've read it alongside with in November, there's no chance that it absolutely craps the bed here in the last 100 or 2 pages that I have left. To put it into perspective, out of all the 11 months that I've given a Book of the Month to so far in 2022, and then of course my favorite book of 2021 that I read near the end of that year, taking those 12 to 15-ish books that I mentioned in those lists, and those 12 or so times that I did a Book of the Month, this would have won Book of the Month if I had read it in any other month leading up to this point. I'll say if Les Mis probably would have won all but maybe 2 or 3 of those months pretty handily and pretty easily. That is how much I've been enjoying this so far. And like, it's not just me faking for street cred or whatever you want to call it, because like people can't like the classics. I heard that one by a couple people recently this month, but no, like Les Mis, it's actually very, very good. It's honestly fantastic. I've enjoyed nearly every minute of it. There was the first book in part 2 that was a little bit slow, but I've come to appreciate a lot in the aftermath because of the way it intertwines with the story later. And then the first few books of book 3 were a little slow, or sorry, part 3 were a little bit slower. And I wasn't super into that, but outside of that, I've either really enjoyed or absolutely loved every single book in Les Mis so far. So yeah, I think that by the end of the month, even if I were to be recording this video at the end of November and I had finished Les Mis, I am absolutely certain that I would be able to say it fully deserves being Book of the Month, even if it hadn't been the only physical book that I read. Now that I've covered all that, let's actually get into what I plan to read in December. Now, December, in some sense, I'm hoping to be a little bit lighter on, to not read quite so much, because I've spent so much time reading September and October, and even despite the breaks in reading a couple times in November, I've also, the times that I did spend reading, I spent a lot of time reading, and I want to be able to take a slight break, a little bit ease off the pedal so that I don't burn myself out right as I'm going into 2023. But the first book that I do plan to read in December is Demon in White by Christopher Rocchio. And like I have with the past 2 entries, I'm going to go ahead and hold up both versions of the book that I own just because I can. Now, Howling Dark was very good, definitely a Book of the Year contender. It tied with the Iliad as my favorite book in September. Really unfair to give the edge either to Iliad or Howling Dark in that month. Reading both of them that month was just made September amazing for my reading. But I loved Howling Dark, and I've really enjoyed the novellas and the short stories. And I enjoyed Empire of Silence too, just not quite as much as most of the rest of the Sun Eater that I've read. Demon in White, a lot of people put the edge on which one's better between Howling Dark and Demon in White. They give it to Demon in White. A lot of people do. Some give it to Howling Dark, some don't. So really back and forth depending on which aspects you really love about Sun Eater the most. So I'm confident that I'll love Demon in White when I read it in December, but I'm looking very much forward to it, even though I'm not entirely sure how ready I am to go through the whole aneurysm thing over and over again as I read the book, because there is sure to be some really crazy things that happen just reading through the Demon in White read-along thread in the server, the Discord servers. I'm not sure I'm ready to read Demon in White, but I'm very excited to do so nonetheless. After I have finished Demon in White, I will be reading another Sun Eater story, actually. It's Sun Eater stories. So I've already read Queen of Mid-Ashes, but now that I have Queen of Mid-Ashes and other stories, I have a copy of Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2 to be able to read. I'll be reading Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2 right after I finish Demon in White, or maybe I'll fit something in between just to, take a little bit of a break between Sun Eater entries, but I'm not sure. I really enjoyed Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 1, and I've heard a lot of good things about many of the stories in Volume 2 as well, so I'm excited to be able to get to that in December. And after I have finished Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2, the last thing that I really have planned on my TBR is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Now, this copy that I have includes several other Christmas stories that he has written, and I'm not sure how many of those, if any of them, I'll be able to get to in December in terms of time, but if I have a few days at the end of December, and preferably if I be able to be done with all the Sun Eater stuff before Christmas, I would love to be able to read A Christmas Carol and finish out the month and the year with that for a little bit of a holiday-related story before I jump into the horror that is going to be Kingdoms of Death in 2023. So that's the plans. If I have any extra time to read anything else in December, I'm not sure if I'll actually take the opportunity to do so. I might play another game, take a little bit of a break in between school semesters, just so that I can, ease off before I go into my final semester of school and, to avoid a little bit more of that burnout to happen. But if I do decide I want to read something else in December, I'm probably going to struggle bus my way through what is it, Tides of War? Yeah, Tides of War by Stephen Pressfield, the one that I put on pause earlier this year. I think in August, in August it was, but that was one that I didn't quite finish earlier this year that I do legitimately want to finish, if nothing else than just to see if it actually ends really good, even though the first almost third of it that I've read really wasn't clicking with me, and I want to be able to actually give it a star score and be able to give more well-rounded and thought-out opinions on the book, since if I finish it, I'll have finished it instead of DNFing it. So, yeah, that's just kind of on the backlog for the moment that I would like to be able to get to in December if I have, a lot of extra time to do some extra reading, but we'll see what happens. That comes to the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I appreciate all of the support that I've been given through the entire year, quite frankly, but especially the last few months, which have just been crazy in terms of my analytics. Sorry for that voice crack, by the way. In terms of my views and my watch time, been really blown away by all of the support, and I really appreciate it. And then, just as I mentioned earlier, be sure to come around and watch the State of Affairs video on January 1st, 2023. That will talk about some of the changes that will be coming to the channel. So I appreciate you coming around and sticking around. I will see you guys next week with whatever it is I'm reviewing. I forget exactly what it is. It might be The Odyssey by Homer that I'm reviewing next week. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. So if you want to see my talk about some writings of Homer, I did a review on the Iliad a couple weeks ago, and I'll be doing The Odyssey next week. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be back again in whatever the next video is.